Okay, we're ready.
All right, folks, thanks for your patience. We're going to dive right in. Welcome to today's FileMaker Academy webinar series. Chris, as the other organizer, if you can mute, that would be helpful. I'm getting a little bit of an echo.
Thank you.
All right, folks, my goal here today is to cover some quick table view enhancements, and part of this is going to be sort of giving you an overview of table view in general. Many of you have seen table view. It's been around for a long time, but it's been evolving pretty dramatically over the last few versions. So I'm going to go through a couple of standard housekeeping slides and introduce myself, and then we'll dive into the content and then some demos. So before I dive in, I want to thank our host, FileMaker Academy. Skeleton Key is proud to be a charter member, along with the other companies you see on the screen in front of you, who put together FileMaker Academy to promote FileMaker Pro and the platform, as well as education. A number of the members of FileMaker Academy are also FTS authorized trainers that can help you get certified in FileMaker. This is one of a 12-part series about FileMaker 12, so we're happy and privileged to be a part of that, each focusing on specific aspects of the new product and changes that have been wrought. So my goal today is to focus on quick table view, but we'll spill a little bit into quick charts and some other aspects like themes, because these affect table view as well. A couple of things you should know. If you have a question, you have the ability to type the question mark icon or enter chat, I think, directly for questions. I know there's a lot of unanswered or answered questions in there related to the audio trouble we had in the beginning here, so I'll be looking for some patience toward the end as we look through to see what questions we should answer. Beyond that, if you have any questions we don't get to, feel free to send an email to info@skeletonkey.com. Be happy to follow up and reply to those questions offline. Or for that matter, if you have to come up with corrections, I'm always welcoming candid feedback about errors or omissions in the actual content. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the president of Skeleton Key, a FileMaker Business Alliance Platinum member based in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm an authorized trainer for 10 and 11 and soon 12. Certified developer for 8, 9, 10, 11, and of course soon to be 12. And I've been a speaker at FileMaker Developer Conference the last 2 years and this year as well, where I tend to speak about performance of FileMaker solutions or anything else if you'll let me track you down and pin you down to talk about FileMaker or your business. Last year I was honored to receive an Outstanding Contributor to the Community Award at DevCon, mostly for the work I think that I did building on the shoulders of giants about performance, really just helping people understand some of that functionality, and recently produced a how-to guide for FileMaker that you can find up there on the FileMaker developer community about making faster iOS database apps, and hope to continue to offer some help up there as well. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about table view and spend a little bit of time about the evolution of this feature, show how it sort of over time sort of had incremental changes, most of which have happened in the last few versions. We're going to look specifically at the documented changes that are available. And then we're going to go through a couple of items worth mentioning, some subtle differences in keyboard behavior and mousing behavior, some limitations that you should be aware of, and then if time permits, a little bit about playing nicely with others in a multi-user file with table view, because a lot of the beginning stuff here is really just focusing on the feature as it's documented, as opposed to when you actually start using it in a multi-user environment, what kinds of situations can you get into. I should also mention that I'm a slow adopter of table view. I didn't even realize in some ways that it was there. I ignored it so much in the beginning. It wasn't until really FileMaker 10, 11 that I started really noticing it as a tool that I could use and now use literally on a daily basis to do ad hoc reporting and analysis of my data. So my hope was by taking this relatively simple topic about 12 to also introduce it to some of you who may not be using it or may not be using it in multi-user environments where it could potentially be very useful. And the quick charts feature really gives you a good reason to look at it. I won't be spending a lot of time getting into the quick chart functionality beyond how to invoke it and some of the limitations that are specific to it, unlike other charting capabilities in FileMaker. But I would recommend you look back to the previous webinar series by Jerry Salem of IT Solutions, another member of FileMaker Academy, where he covered charting in depth. And I think quick charts a little bit, but he certainly would provide greater expertise, I think, about that within the time I have allowed today. So let's dive in. So the evolution of this feature, there's really, as you can see here, I kind of just drew the line here at FileMaker 10 because there was almost no change in FileMaker's table view feature in previous versions. From when 6, I believe, when it was first introduced, through 7, 8, 9, the feature hardly modified or changed in any significant way. With 10, they introduced the concept of modifying the table view, which allowed users to directly manipulate what they saw in table view, and in certain cases without really impacting other users of the system. So we're going to take a look at that when I get into demo mode. But the idea is add and remove columns from the local table or other related tables and effectively create your own little sandbox. Of course, that feature has continued to be maintained and is now even more ubiquitous in versions 11 and 12. 11 added in a couple new capabilities and was really a paradigm shift for Table View. And that is it became the default method for defining fields or managing your database. Now, I'd call it define fields here, which kind of harkens back to the early days of FileMaker, but mostly to specify that this is really about creating and defining field options for the current table. You didn't have the ability through that system to go directly into creating a new table. You kind of had to have a table there. Then you could modify that table's view and also modify fields within that table. You certainly could use it to get into the schema in general, but you'd still have to switch to another layout if you created a new table. So it was really a field modification tool, and it became, I think, sort of a nod to the fact that many of the users who came to FileMaker were sort of used to Excel. And there's certainly a lot of compatibility and interactivity that you can develop with FileMaker and Excel. But there's often times when FileMaker is seen as sort of the next step up for someone who's really trying to grapple with data in Excel and is sort of struggling with sort of how big that application is and all the other things it does. So by creating another method for defining fields on the fly, you could effectively open up a new file and start building columns and entering rows like you would in a spreadsheet. And so that feature has had some refinements as we see as we go up the list here. But that really was new in 11 and became, like I said, a default way to start creating your database that you could override to bring up the familiar Manage Database dialog box. 11 also introduced a new concept of grouping and summarizing. This was the idea that you could, in Table View, actively enable and disable leading and trailing summary parts or leading and trailing grand summaries and populate them with various summary fields. And all of this, of course, in Table View was really only in this sandbox. It wasn't directly manipulating the content on the layout. So you effectively were working on like an overlay that was inheriting some stuff from the current layout, but then would act independently from it. And that is really a super powerful feature. That's really what kind of drew me to Table View and to take a fresh look at it, is suddenly I could really use it to generate quick snapshot analyses of information. And if I had the right privileges and I needed certain summary fields, it would even create those summary fields for me. So there are some limits here in terms of access privileges as to which of these features you can leverage. For the sake of today's discussion until the very end, I'm focusing on your full access user to your file. And so if that's not a realistic scenario, we'll be sure to cover a little bit about that in the end in terms of what can a non-full access user do with Table View and what can't they do. So what 12 brings to the table are a series of items. First of all, a major revamp of the submenus. These are the menus that show up contextually when you click on column headings or the row or part headings. And so we'll take a closer look at that, but I've got some screenshots. And they've really just kind of reorganized things to help make them a little easier to navigate while also making them continue to be familiar and logical. You now have direct access to the Table View properties themselves. So the sort of whether you show the header or the footer and whether you have grid lines or not, these things used to require going into layout mode and then going into layout setup and then going into the table properties. And now you can invoke that same dialog box directly from within Table View. You also have much greater sort control. You've been able to select multiple columns and sort by them and incorporate that into your sort of interacting and navigation through the Table View interface. But now you have the ability to unsort and remove specific fields from the sort selectively. So you don't have to necessarily invoke the sort dialog box if you want. You can master those keystrokes and do them right there in the Table View. Now I myself, like most of you, are relatively new to 12, so even though I've been working with it for a little while, I still haven't quite mastered all those keystrokes and might find it easier to go back to using sort dialogs. But I'm at least going to show you where those are, and if you're a keyboard and mouse person, you'll probably find that those are really useful and at times perhaps easier to interact with. And then finally is the quick chart feature. And while quick charts aren't exclusively available to table views, they're kind of a nice counterpart. You can certainly invoke quick charts from form views and list views and other types of found sets in your system, but within a table view, when you're already summarizing and sorting information and grouping it in various ways, the ability to generate a quick chart on the fly, which is also like at the bottom of this list here, the modified table view, it's also sort of a user sandbox kind of environment where the user can maybe do some of their own business intelligence or data mining without requiring programming effort, or at least not in-depth programming effort. It's worth pointing out that it's, like I said, it's a natural corollary or counterpart to modifying table view. It's an item that seems to have a natural place there, and so we're going to take a couple seconds to look at how you invoke that and how it sort of intelligently responds to the state of your layout. But again, I'm not going to go very deep into the charting module beyond just showing you how to bring it up. So let's talk about the evolution of the feature. First of all, what we have here is the version 6 on the left and the version 12 on the right dialog box for table view properties. And you can see that it's really very little different. There's been a change from the grid style interface where you used to define it with a color and a pattern, whereas now it's a color and a pop-up menu of pattern options, which are fairly limited. But other than that, the general functionality of table view from a properties perspective is really no different than it ever has been. And so while you can invoke this dialog box now more easily from inside table view without going under the hood, you won't find that there's a lot of changed settings here that you need to grapple with. But the menu setup is dramatically different. And what I've got here is 6 on the left, 11 in the middle, for those of you who've been used to that, and then 12 on the right. And you can see it's a quantum leap from what you used to be able to do when you right-clicked on a column or control-clicked on a column in Table View in 6. Basically, you could invoke the help system, which would tell you that you could only do about 4 things, which was sort in various ways or set a column width. And the fact that items are gray or not gray really has to do with when I took these screenshots. So in certain situations, obviously certain features are available, and in other cases they're not. In 11, we got a whole bunch of changes. There were some incremental changes along the way, but 11 was the real moment when we had field type and field option settings available to us, because now we could manage our database, at least partially, within this interface. We had some leading grouping and trailing grouping options that allowed us to interact with the data in a summarizing format. And since browsable subsummaries were introduced at the same time, suddenly we had a table view with live browsable subsummaries. We didn't have to go to preview mode to see the results of our analysis. And even better, it wasn't modifying the layout proper. So we could really create very quick assessments of information and counts and totals and such and subtotals, all within this sort of sandbox. Of course, we had the column width option, and then we had a number of other options related to field, hiding the field, deleting the field. Again, some of these having to do with what you see, and some of these having to do with actually changing the schema. And then the ability to modify the table view or reset the table view. And I'm going to set aside what reset table view meant in 11 and what it means in 12. When I talk about the playing nicely with others component, in a multi-user environment or even in a single-user environment, what that means. And I'm going to demonstrate that. That'll be a little easier to show than to tell. In 12, the biggest change, other than the addition of some new features, which you can see quite clearly there, remove field from sort or unsort, the ability to interact with grand summaries and remove or add them, as well as the sub-summaries for the individual elements. They've done some sub-menu organization. They've moved all the different field commands into a field sub-menu. They moved other different table view commands like modify table view and reset table view and set column width into the table view section. So it was really a reorganization effort while at the same time introducing new features, which I commend FileMaker for doing that. It really made it a lot easier to navigate through this without having to find some field options at the top and some field options at the bottom. Now they're kind of grouped together, and I can ignore them if I'm really just doing reporting and I'm not actually creating new fields. Submenus, of course, are pretty much the same as they were in 11. You can see under the leading subtotals or trailing subtotals, there's this various list. Some of these will be available for you depending on whether or not you're working with a field that naturally is totalable, a number field. Other fields, like text fields and such, you can count them, but you can't total them or average them. So on some level, I'd love it if you could do some of those operations on some of these text fields so that you could get some additional values to display that maybe aren't what you'd be looking or expect. But there are some ability to, using the row options in the menus, to alter what displays in some of those sub-summary parts. So we'll look at that during the demo as well. You can see here is the reorganization of the field submenu with the field types, the field options, the ability for you to interact with these things that previously were up in the menu proper themselves. And then finally, the table view. We can modify the table view. We can reset the table view. We can set the column width. These are things we've had before, but then edit properties. That's that new command that lets us bring up the table properties themselves. Now, on the row menu, I didn't really go back beyond 11 because there wasn't any row menu, at least in my quick trip down memory lane, launching every version I had installed from 6 forward. I found that it really wasn't until 11 that we started having enough of a space to click on to produce a row submenu or a row contextual So in 11, we had some simple commands related to the record we're on, the row we're on. And we also had a modified table view option there, which was also available up there in the layout toolbar. And then we had some part color interaction here. And it's useful to note that, while they grouped a couple of new options under table view, you'll notice that one of these alternate colors indicates it's locked. And that's going to be another one of those subtle differences and gotchas to watch out for that I'll cover in one of my final slides. The introduction of the new themes or some other choices you might deliberately make on your own layouts can lead to a state of a locking of the alternate color. And this, I admit, might very well have been true in 11, and I just never tried to do it. But it's even more likely maybe to happen now in 12 with some of the custom colors that are built into some of the themes. So I'll demonstrate that when I get to the demo. Speaking of which, let's go to the demo. We'll come back to that. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to just take a simple 500 record file I have. This is some of the sample data that's available online from Brian Dunning's great site. And I'm just going to drag this over to FileMaker 12 and convert it into a FileMaker 12 file and let it appear on my screen. So the default behavior for when you're converting some raw data like this is to display the data in table view, which is shown by that little icon up there. And you've already probably tinkered with this yourself. You can go from the form view, which is one record at a time, to the list view, which is multiple records at a time, to the table view. You can also notice that having converted this file, that it's automatically been converted into a standard theme. I think it's the cool gray theme. So I'll go to Layout, and I'll look at the Layout Setup. Actually, I'm going to say that I need to go to Layout, Change Theme. I can see that it's set to cool gray. So by default, this is how it fills things in. And this is one of the reasons why my default screenshots displayed that the alternate color was locked. If I go back here into Browse Mode, and I'm looking at Table View, and I go over here to this menu, you'll see that I get this alternate color locked option. And this really has to do with the fact that part colors can be altered, or alternate colors can be enabled only when the part that you're clicking on doesn't already contain a fill image, which is a new graphic layout surface feature, or have a custom color assigned to them, i.e. a color that's not part of the picker. So even though I'm getting what appears to be some kind of highlight or something around this white section, and it kind of looks different depending on when I click on it, what I really have under the hood there is a custom color that came in with the cool gray theme. And you can see that by going in here and looking at the fill color, that the other color option has been checked. So if you're struggling with that particular feature as we're kind of going through your testing, you can change the theme to the classic theme. The classic theme will eliminate that custom color from that body part. It's very possible there's other themes that don't use custom colors, and I just haven't explored them all. But I wanted to point out at least that the default behavior right now for FileMaker when you convert data like this in the drag-and-drop fashion is going to be to inherit this cool gray theme, and unfortunately one of those aspects of dealing with table view is going to be sort of just out of reach. But we're not going to focus on what we can't do. Let's focus on things we can do. So again, for those of you who've been using table view for a while, some of this is going to be a bit remedial, but I'm going to want to show the basics anyway. So some simple things you could do here. I'm in as a full access user. I've got some raw data. I might want to do something like get a sense within my 500 records how many there are per state. So using the submenu that's available up there, I can do things like add a leading group by state. Now it's going to add a little break at each state. I can go in here and I can add a leading subtotal, which because it's text can't be anything but counted. Since I have full access privileges, when I choose this option, in order for table view to provide me the content it needs to generate a summary field that's going to count the state field. And so it's going to do that automatically for me, and it's going to fill it in and insert it and display it in that particular zone. It's not going to work for you if you're a non-full access user. So this is where we start to kind of divide the haves from the have-nots. Your users who are going to want to leverage those kinds of features, the counts, the totals, and so on, are going to find themselves needing you to set those up for them. It doesn't really matter what you call them because they are in their very nature a summary of a field, a total of, a count of, an average of, and so on. And so regardless of what name you happen to have given it in the actual managed database dialogues, it knows that count, state count, whatever it happened to be called. It just so happens that this is the name of that field. And as other fields get created, they will appear in those brackets after the names. But The idea here is that if you're yourself in a sandbox, you can create these fields on the fly without ever going under the hood. If you're an end user who has no access to the schema to actually create fields or tables, you're going to rely on these being pre-seeded for you by the developer. So you'll need to kind of think a little bit ahead of, if I'm going to get Table View into the mix of tools I offer my users for very good reasons I'm about to show, I think, you're going to want to make sure that you turn on by creating some of these totals and averages and other things for them. So they're laying there waiting to be invoked by the user. So some basic functionality here. I've got some sorts and capabilities here. I can obviously leverage some of this if I sort by other columns. So that goes away. I can do here add deleting group by zip. The same count system is available to me. It happens to be showing in the state column, but it's a count of a value that's never null for these records, so it works just as well. I certainly could add a count as zip if I wanted to, although that may be a little unnecessary and a little redundant. It's going to give me the same values all the way across the board. I want to say, and this is something we might have time to test, and I'm going a little off script here, but if we already had a count of something like ID or some other kind of count of primary key, I'm not sure, but I want to say that as a non-full access user, it may permit me to use that count, but I may find that I have to put it in that column. So what I'm getting here is slightly redundant counts because technically I guess the count could be different if some of these were null values. I think the key point I'm trying to show here is that effectively that you can turn on and off deleting groups and trailing groups, and you can turn on and off various summary fields. There are a couple gotchas here worth noting. For example, let's say I do a running count next to a count. They don't necessarily differentiate themselves by label. So they both show up as the word count. This is something that was true in 11 when this first feature was first introduced, and it's still true in 12. So if you are really leaning heavily on Table View, you're going to find that some of the lack of differentiation between total, running total, count, and running count are going to be a little frustrating just because they don't specifically label themselves differently. You're also going to find that you don't have quite the same amount of control over the formatting, it seems at least, of the numbers themselves. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and create a number field of some kind because we don't happen to have one in this sample data. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to modify my table view. So and I'm kind of demonstrating some of these features. Number field has been added for me automatically because my preferences for 12 are set to automatically add fields to my layouts. And I'm just going to go ahead and unsort my records, which I could do that way, or I can go up here and I can choose from the new pop-up menu option in the column headings to unsort all the records. And I'm just going to type in a value in here. We're going to go ahead and put in a random calculation. If I can remember the right syntax for this, I probably won't. So I'm going to pick it. So I've got some numbers in here now. And you can see I can do much more now because I've got a number value that I can actually do totals. And I can actually need to make the column wider so I can see the totals. And then, of course, if I was to do some kind of leading subtotal, running total, I'm not going to see much of a difference there, again, in the labeling or the numbers. Of course, if I sort by zip, I'm going to get some slightly different numbers here because one is a running accumulative value and the other one is a total just for that particular set. But you'll notice that in both these cases, the numbers just kind of came in with a format. Let's say I wanted to round these a certain way. This isn't the kind of thing I can necessarily control here at this level. That's the kind of thing where you actually do need to go into layout mode. And all of these aspects I'm discussing are really covered quite well in the FileMaker help on Table View. And even these specific nuances like, well, if I put a field on the layout and it doesn't format the way I want, and then I add a summary field of some kind to display, and the system creates that for me, how is it going to be formatted? How does it know to be in currency? How does it know to be in decimals? So effectively what this has to do with is, was there anything there to give it a clue in the first place? In this case, the number field was created, which I could have done any number of ways. I could have done it here by going in and creating a new field. That's the plus button here. It lets me add another field to the database. Let's say I want to put a date field in here. I have the option to then choose the field type and make sure that this is actually a date field. Similar dialog boxes to what I would get if I was defining the database under the hood. And then, of course, I have the ability to put in a value. Let's say I put in today's date across all the records. But again, how did this date know that it should show in this format and not show in, let's say, a year dash month dash day format? And like the number, how does it know to not round or to round the display or to include a currency format or something? And this really has to do with the default behavior of the fields as they appear on the layout. So the number field and the date field have been added to my layout because those are the preferences for my copy of FileMaker, that as I make new fields, it should add them to the layout that I'm on. In this case, the number field, its data format is set to be a general format, so it comes in sort of displaying whatever was typed in. I have the option to override that and, let's say, make it a decimal value, make it 2 decimals, maybe use a 1,000 separator if it's big enough. And now I'm going to see that while my number field reflects that change, my summary field does not. But that's pretty easy to fix. You literally just hide them and no longer display them. And they're still there in the file. You can see there as I go to my leading subtotals that it still has memory, that there's a match out there for this need. There is a field out there that totals this column, so it can now leverage that. And now that I add it back in, it will inherit the settings for the column it's totaling. And the same will be true for financials. If you have a financial value and it's formatted properly, then when you add the summary field above it, it will inherit that formatting. And you can do some neat tricks with this. You can kind of game it a little bit if you want to. Let's say I wanted these totals to be bold. Now I'm kind of going off the script a little bit again, but I know this works with some of the numbers. Let's see if the themes kind of jam me up here at all. I'm going to go ahead and remove this total. I'm going to go into browse mode and make this bold. Oops, need to use the right keystroke to do that. I'm going to come back into browse mode, save my changes. I'm going to add that leading subtotal. I expect it's going to come in bold with a decimal format now. Okay, doesn't look like it is. So I'm thinking the themes are jamming me up there. I know that there are situations where I could do things that it'll bring that value in, and then I could go back and change the number field and change its format, and it won't update the summary field. And that's nice if you sort of have, let's say, dollar values that you want to display the dollar signs only on the subtotals, but not on all the individual entries. It's possible if I remove the theme, go to Classic, that I'll find that that works better. But in the interest of time, it's worth experimenting with. The key thing there is the summary fields generally inherit the formatting for the column that they're modifying. If the summary field already exists, no big deal. Just hide it, make your changes to your core field, your column field, and then go back. Of course, if there's no column field on the layout at this juncture, and you've just added it in your modified table view, so for example, if I come in here and let's say take number out, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily not something I can include and put back into table view. I can modify my table view and add it. You'll notice that unlike the fields that are actually on the layout, which I can hide, I can't really kind of delete them completely, so that there's no trash can icon here. Again, these are features that have been available since modified table view was available, but these may be unfamiliar. This interface is basically saying, if I'd like to, I can hide or show a field. I can reorder the position of that field, so it can be moved around in terms of where it appears. You can notice it's moving in the background. But I can't actually remove it because it belongs to the layout, and removing it would literally delete it. So I can hide a field on the layout from showing in table view, but I can't delete it from the table view setup. It kind of has to be there. Whereas the number field, I can hide it or show it, and if I want to, I can even delete it from the list so it stops being something that's available to me. So in this case, I've added this to my table view, but it's not actually on the layout. You notice it's still not showing up there. But now, again, I can go and I can add my leading subtotal. And again, I don't really have any field in here that I can use to control the look and feel of that leading subtotal. Of course, I could add the leading subtotal right to the layout, and then I could maybe make some changes directly to it so that I actually have more discrete control over it. And now that I actually have that in there, let's hide this. And I want to say if I, again, get rid of, which one do I have? Get rid of the total, and then bring it back in, because there's one on the layout that it can reference. No, it's not picking that up. So I'm going to blame themes because it's easy to blame, and they don't have anyone speaking for them right now. But there are some ability for you to game that. I'm obviously stumbling into a little bit of a problem with doing it. So let's move on to some other features that are available to you and maybe have changed a little bit along the way. First of all, as before in previous previous versions, the most recent 10 and 11. You can select multiple columns. Depending on your platform, I believe in both platforms, the Shift key allows you to select multiple columns, and either the Control or the Command key, depending on your platform, will allow you to deselect specific columns. So if you want to get multiple columns in the mix and then choose to sort them all at the same time, you can incorporate them all into your sort. You now have the ability, though, to also specifically, let's say, click on one particular column and just remove it from the sort. So at this juncture, our sort dialog box is state, county, and zip because that's the order I happen to have clicked them before. But now I have the ability to come in here and say remove zip from sort. And so it continues to maintain state and county. That'll be true also if I was to, let's say I wanted to sort this ascending. So now that's overridden it. I'm going to go zip, state, county in that order and choose sort ascending. And I believe we're going to find that it's zip, state, county. And I can do this even with something in the middle. Like I can fill out zip, state, but it won't affect zip. So I can remove all the fields from sort because I have multiple fields selected, or I can select just the state field, and I can remove the state from the sort. And it pulls it right out of the middle without changing the rest of the records around it. So I think the key thing here to notice is that the default behavior of the table view when I created it was automatically had the headers are clickable, but the headers don't automatically sort the data. And that's often a preferred behavior. We often kind of are expecting that in the table view, that we want the column headings to sort by default. But one could argue that with the addition now of the ability to specifically remove out of the middle of a sort order a unique field, or unsort the whole thing and otherwise have more discrete sorting controls, that having that turned off by default might be preferable. That way, as you're clicking around and trying to select multiple values here and trigger a change across all of them, you won't accidentally be sorting as you go. You'd have a little bit more discrete control. Nothing, of course, stops you from invoking the sort dialog box with Control or Command-S, and then specifically manipulating the things the way you want them to go so that you can get a hybrid mix. It's a little harder to get that kind of hybrid control with the right keystrokes, and I admit I'm not 100% familiar with the exact sequence I need to click without making a few mistakes to see if I can flip a particular one while there are multiple ones selected. I think the idea here is just adding additional capabilities, but if you have something unique, you may want to lead on the traditional mechanisms for doing your sorting. Of course, unsorting is a lot easier now because it just takes everything away no matter which one you click on. There's nothing selective or specific about that you need to invoke. Some other changes that came along are a little bit subtle between 11 and 12, and this is the mechanism by which you actually create new fields. So first of all, let me check my preferences, and I can see that the Use Manage Database dialog to create files is disabled. This means that basically the default behavior if I make a new database in my FileMaker Pro 12 application is going to be to bring up a table view for me to interact with. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, new database. I'm going to save it for demo. And you can see it came up here. And there's some cosmetic differences between this and 11. We can display those side by side during the Q&A if there's necessary questions. There's some changes in terms of also how the menus behave on this first row. But we're going to go just focus really quickly here on some simple keystroke changes. First of all, you click on here to create a field, and it's going to give you a chance now to type a name. So I can do name. Now in 12, you can hit Tab, and it will actually let you create the next column. So previously, I believe you had to hit Enter to commit, and then you'd have to hit the plus button to make a new. And now you can actually navigate this with the keyboard. It's possible there were keyboard controls for doing that before, but I'm a diehard. I would use Manage Database to create my databases. So Tab will commit the current field edit you're making and move you to the next one. So you can literally, create a pretty quick, last name, company, title, without really touching your mouse at all. You can also Shift Tab to move backwards if you want to just edit. So if I really wanted to change this to be first name, and if I made a typo, I'm doing a lot of typos. I'm doing a lot of stuff here without having to actually touch my mouse. It also used to be that you could hit Escape to basically undo a change before I committed it. So while I'm still editing this, I can hit Escape, and it goes back to the last setting. But now you can actually use a standard command like Control-Z or Command-Z to undo it, or I believe use the undo command, and it will also revert those changes as well. So you have some more discrete controls than just the escape. The same is true if I'm here and I'm editing this one, I hit Tab. If I hit Escape, it'll undo the creation of that accidental field. So if you find yourself in a rhythm and you're sort of going along, Tab, Tab, and you're like, whoops, you can at least undo the last one. It's not a multiple level of undo because you actually have created these fields. But of course, if you do make a mistake like that, there's always the delete field option, although we'd caution you to be careful about delete field. Make sure there's really no data. I know there's 0 records, so I'm not deleting anything other than my schema. Another change that's happened in 11 and 12, other than the sort of escape and undo commands or the tab and shift tab to move between the column headings and to create new fields, is the change in what you get as a default contextual menu here on the very first row. You'll notice in 12, I only get record-related commands or general table view properties. It's not until I make my first record that I actually have the option to interact with part colors and settings, because there really is no body part. And I want to say that in 11 there were some of these commands were available to you in terms of part color a little sooner. And so that's changed a little bit, that you kind of have to have a data value in here, or at least a record in here before you have direct access to this menu. It kind of expands once that part is available. We, of course, have the ability to still add summaries. And a feature that I believe is available in 11 and still available in 12, but I want to point it out, is you do have the ability to not just change part colors, but let's say I add a, let's say a leading subtotal account. I want to say, no, I'm forgetting where this actual feature is, where you can actually insert a value in the part across the screen. You'll notice, again, I'm running into a situation here where my part color is locked. Again, this has to do with the fill. I just want to show you how that can be fixed by changing the theme. So I'm going to change myself to Classic. At that juncture, the body part has a standard white color on it. So now I'm going to find when I go in here that I actually have no longer found myself locked. I can interact directly with that part as well. So this is the basic parameters of using Table View. I'm going to switch back to my other demo file because I want to show you exactly what you can do with some quick chart functionality. Now, I'm not a charting expert. I would never pretend to be. There's much better people out there, Jerry being one of them, who can really help you understand how charts work, and of course the members of my team who develop on a daily basis and build solutions for customers are much more familiar with it. But I want to give you some basic ideas about the quick chart feature before we talk about some of the hidden gotchas and multi-user friendliness, and have a chance to save maybe 15 minutes here at the end for questions. So first of all, quick charting is a new feature which basically takes contextual cues from your screen and your current found set and your sort order to determine how it might pre-assemble a chart for you. The idea is almost like a charting wizard that looks at what you're doing to try to offer you some options. So in the simplest form, I could do something, let's say, like sort by state. And I'm going to get rid of any of these. Actually, I'll leave these here because these could be helpful for us to see. I'm going to get rid of some of the unnecessary subtotals that really don't have anything to do with what we're doing. And at this juncture, we'll focus on just the simple count. How many of these 500 records are in Arkansas or Alaska or Alabama or Arizona and so on. So I can come up here and there's a new chart feature that's built into the pop-up menu. It shows at various layers as you go down, and it will have slightly different options. For example, up here I have chart by state, and it's going to bring up a little chart setup dialog box, and here it's what's giving me is a count of the number of records in my 500, which are from each state. Now you notice a couple of things here. As a full access user, I have the Save As Layout option. Anybody who has layout modifying privileges and is allowed to create new layouts in your solution. So both layout modifying privileges that are specifically geared to allow them to create new layouts. If you let them create existing layouts, it can't use this feature. But if they can create new layouts, they have the ability to create a chart, tweak it, adjust it, modify it, change the colors, whatever it is they want to do. And then if they like that, hit Save As Layout, and it will create a layout based on the context and chart that was needed that they can then leverage and include as part of their standard reporting. Otherwise, this chart setup dialog box is pretty much a dead end, meaning that it's really for ad hoc charting on the fly by your users. They can modify all the different settings that are available to the quick chart and regular charting dialog boxes. They can choose different types of charts. So they could say, maybe I want to see a pie chart. Maybe I want to see values on the charts. Maybe I want to see percentages. And they could adjust the fonts and make it all beautiful and so on. But they're only going to be able to basically print this if they want to change the sort, this is a real gotcha, but it's worth noting. You'll notice that they can't. The sort options here are unavailable. So if they get really far down the road in terms of what they want as a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing chart, and they're not about to save it as a layout where they could then go maybe make underlying sort changes to the data, they're going to have just wasted a bunch of time doing design. So it's really important that you present this quick chart feature as, for users who don't have layout creation access, as really an ad hoc reporting tool that they should use quickly to identify whether there's a useful chart that can provide them meaningful business information before they invest a lot of effort in cosmetically making it beautiful. Once they've gotten the right sort and the right columns and the right series, then they should go to level 2, which is let's refine this. Let's print it out. Let's do something to preserve it. Let's get layout privileges if we think it's worth saving, or take screenshots or other kinds of notes about how I created this chart so I can tell my database administrator what to do. But it's really easy with eye candy to kind of get attracted to it and lose out on the most important thing, which is getting it to tell you what you're looking for it to tell you before you spend a lot of time making it look pretty. So that's about as far as I want to go into quick charts, other than to demonstrate one other aspect of it, which is you can see here in this case I went to the top and I chose chart by state. If I go into other parts, I might find that I'm going to get slightly different options. I believe if I go here, I have chart by state. I want to say if I have a secondary sort, I can do things, let's say, by sort by county within state. And then I want to say if I go to the county, I'll now find that I have a chart menu that has both the original, a chart by county, chart by the column I'm clicking on, or potentially chart county by state. And of course, you'd have to get really familiar with charting to have a better understanding about how many you get here. I think this is telling me how many counties are represented in each state, but I'm not a charting wizard, so I'd probably spend more time than I should clicking around in here. But the key thing here I want to point out is that we have a compound sort going on, and we could potentially even have multiple columns here. I could select 3 columns and sort them all into the mix, and then I could go into one and find that it's trying its best to come up with situations where it has multi-tiered sorting going on to try to create something meaningful. But like we've all seen in charting, if you're not using the right chart type or using the right series, you could very easily get something that looks like a whole bunch of lines, whether that's a pie chart or whether that's a column chart or some other kind of chart. So if you're a charting expert or you really understand statistical analysis using charting, I'd say start out simple, as in start by having a single sort, get some basic intelligence out of the systems that you can use it to give yourself some basic charting functionality with quick charts, and be aware that any time you spend in here could be brief and sandbox-ish. If you don't have the Save as Layout capability available to you, the most you could do is screenshot or print the chart, but you might not be able to preserve that effort. So it's a great thing to test sort of on your own. I'm going to switch back now to just cover up some of the worth mentioning items after the demo here, some of which I've already mentioned. Some submenu changes, like I said, on the plus button in the margin. Until you have that first row, you really can't interact with that submenu the exact same way as you could in 11. The remove fields from sort, remove field from sort. Remember, if there's a single column selected, you can remove that field selectively from wherever it appears in the sort order. But otherwise, you can use unsort from any column menu anywhere. The tab and shift tab for creating fields, and the availability of not just escape but undo as a way to revert editing to a field title or column title. Some limitations pointed out: you can't sort the current found set with the chart setup dialog box. That can be a bit frustrating as you experiment with quick charts, but I don't want you to spend a lot of time hunting for it. It's not an option. And the fill locking, this idea that the new themes by default when they come in, which is sort of how often data gets converted, will often have a custom color in the part, in the body part, and as a result, you'll find yourself unable to directly interact with it. There are also some themes which have fill images in the body part that give them some of those nice sort of bracketing and halo effects, and so you'll find that those also might frustrate your ability to modify part setups. The last is about playing nicely with others, which is really about what really happens when you're using table mode, table view, and interacting with other people in a multi-user system where some of you have layout editing privileges and some of you don't. And I'd love to point that out, but I want to make sure we take a couple minutes here to see if there's any questions I haven't had a chance to scroll through the list of questions while I've been doing the demo, so Chris, I'm not sure if you've seen any.
Unfortunately, there are only 2 questions. One is, what is FileAxis? I'm not sure if somebody misheard you. I don't recall hearing that. Does that ring a bell to you?
I'm going to guess that might have been the name of a pseudo company in that sample data set. I should know that that sample data set is full of made-up company names and people names, just to make sure that it's not real people. I'm going to assume it's that. We can go look at that and see if there was something else I said.
That's kind of what I thought. And the second question is someone asking if you could actually embed the table view in an already existing layout, I guess like you would a portal or something like that.
You can't actually embed a table view like in a frame. What you can do, and I think we're getting some echo again, Chris, if you don't mind muting.
Okay.
One of the nice things about table view is you can really kind of interact with a window 2 different ways. So I could have a table view window, and just by making a new window, which inherits the current found set and the current status of things, I could have a view that's in list view, a view that's in form view, and a view that's in table view. And for that matter, to a certain degree, I could even have 2 table views going in the sense that I could have different found sets or different sorts. Anything that I do, however, to make changes to the table view, to add or remove subtotals or grand summaries, is really kind of a general change I'm making to my table view. But the idea that the attendee is asking is, can I somehow encapsulate this table view and treat it like a really smart portal somewhere embedded inside of a form view, like in a frame like you would have on like a website? The answer is no. There are tools out there like CC Pivot and other tools which kind of provide table view type capabilities that can be, I believe, embedded in web viewers, and maybe will give you some of that kind of functionality you're looking for. But their compatibility with 12 or their suitability to your particular task I couldn't speak to. But if there's not other major questions, I can use the next few minutes. I could kind of give you guys a quick sense of what this kind of brings up, this whole idea about the table view as a session, a sandbox for the user. I do see that we have, can you turn off features so users cannot create, delete fields? And then also practical limit on the number columns. So I don't know the answer to the last one. I'm going to get back to the field question in a second, and I'm going to use that as a launch pad into access privileges and multi-user system behavior in the 10 minutes that remain. I know that there was something like an 800 or an 8,000 column limit or something. I remember in one of the Train the Trainer events at FileMaker for FileMaker 11, there was a quick test to see how far out the edge of the layout could be. And now when we have defined edges, I'm not even sure what impact that may have, because that really has to do more with the form views and list views than it does with table views, which in many ways, like I said earlier, are kind of an overlay or an independent layout setup for how you look at a layout. So my guess is that there probably is still a limit, but I can't tell you what it is. So that's a great follow-up item. We can see if we can find it. But odds are it's not well documented, and it's one of those things through a little trial and error you'll discover it, because it's probably pretty high, a number. Well beyond the limits of your patience to scroll, I presume, to the left or the right. The question about editing fields really gets me into the access privileges thing. So I'm going to bring this up now. I had a little trouble with my my server implementation on my laptop here. I'm not running the most recent operating system on my own laptop, but I'm going to use this file here as an example to take a quick look at some of the functionality at the privilege set level that can impact A, whether users can actually create fields when in table view, and B, whether they can, what impact they might have on other users of the system, as well as their inability of them to save quick charts as actual layouts. So we're going to go into Managed Security, and I'm going to go into Privilege Sets, and I'm just going to make a duplicate of the data entry set so I can kind of manipulate it, because the ones that are canned, you really can't manipulate them very well. So first of all, the ability for someone to interact with the actual schema to create and edit fields, change the field type, create a new field, delete a field, rename a field, set validation, auto entry, anything like that, including, of course, create tables and, of course, create relationships, is all full access. There is no middle ground between a full access user and some other level of user.
IT Solutions, employee-owned, referral-driven. For quality and training purposes, your call may be monitored and recorded.
Sorry, folks. Let me see if I can.
Thinking about finally upgrading your Windows software, but a little sticker shock by the cost? Well, we have the solution.
I'm not sure if I can dismiss that
Microsoft
attendee or if there's a way to
Small
suppress that
Business
sound.
Server incorporates all the features a small or medium-sized business needs. Email, file sharing, database storage, and safe access to the internet.
I'm going to assume,
all
unless
in
someone
one
chats me to tell me
package
otherwise,
at a
that you guys are
fraction of
hearing
the
this
price.
background noise.
And with IT Solutions, you're getting a Microsoft Gold certified partner and small business specialist to handle the job. To learn more, ask for our sales department or visit www.pickits.com.
Hi, folks. I'm back. I'm hopefully that you can hear me and not hear that sound. I've muted all the other attendees. I'm going to continue on as if you're still there for the next 8 minutes, and hopefully this recording isn't being jammed up by these technical issues. Thanks for your patience with all that. So what I was trying to say there was that full access is what's needed to be able to create, edit, delete fields. That doesn't include modifying your table view to show or hide them, or using the hide command to hide them. It's just your ability to create new ones or edit existing ones, i.e. the field schema settings, not actually creating record data in those columns. So right off the bat, if your users don't have full access, they're not going to be able to use those features. They're going to find that the plus button is either invisible or it's unavailable to them. It doesn't work. I want to say it just will be gray and won't respond to their clicks, but it could be that it disappears. The more important one, I think, because that's kind of a very top-level, high-level, you're either full access or you're not, is the layout controls. View only is the default behavior for a data entry user. And then you have the option to give them custom privileges, specifically on individual layouts, like can they modify this layout or not. You also have the ability to have any new layout. So it could be that they have the ability to modify the existing layouts or don't, but then they also have the ability to create new ones. So a good compromise, I think, if you want to allow your users to really leverage Quick Chart, is to make the layouts view only for the layouts that need to stay the way they are in your system, but give them the ability to create new layouts so that they can actually make new ones. Of course, I believe that that means that other new layouts made by other users may by default be also editable by them, and so I'd want to do some testing to make sure that that was okay. But if the idea here is that they might make charts that they want to share with one another and not lose the Quick Charting that they do, that may be a worthwhile compromise as long as you can preserve the layouts that you really need in the system, the ones that the programmer built and toiled over. So you definitely want to experiment with the layout capabilities and allowing some modification or selective modifications of new ones to let Quick Chart really do its thing. But the key thing I want to point out about this is that anybody who has layout modification abilities, including the full access user, has the ability to have a pretty dramatic impact of other users in Table View for the same layout. So, for example, I'm into this file right now as a full access user, and I know that because I can go to Manage Database and create fields and so on. If I go in and make a change to this system while it's a hosted file, I'm going to be prompted to whether or not I'd like to save those changes with the layout. Now, I can't demonstrate this to you on a standalone file, and I would like to demonstrate it to you with a FileMaker hosted file, but like I said, right before they started, I had some local technical issues with my server install. But you've all probably seen this at some point when you've been logged in as a full access user to an existing database system, and it's multi-user and hosted with FileMaker server, and you go into Table View, and as soon as you click the Table View button, you get prompted, would you like to save this change with the layout? And similarly, if I make other changes like adding a subtotal or adding a grand summary or removing one or dragging and moving columns around or hiding or showing table view changes, as I'm doing each of these things, I'm being prompted, if I have layout editing privileges for the layout that I'm on, whether I want to save those changes. If I'm a user who doesn't have layout privileges, i.e. I don't have the ability to edit the layout, I'll never see those prompts. So the real difference here is that an admin user, full access user, or a user who has layout editing privileges for the layout they're on, effectively is changing the layout design for Table View. Now, you don't see the layout design for Table View when you're in layout mode. There's no way for you to actually see it directly and click on it in the way that you're used to with regular layout mode. And there's nothing in the layout setup here that gives you special access to other properties than the ones you've already seen. So what this really means is what you're doing in those instances is you're either changing the default view for the layout, like come up with Table View already. That's when you click Table View and it prompts you. Or you're actually changing what other users who don't have control over Table View are going to receive. So the scenario would be I'm a full access user or I'm a layout editing user, and I make a change and it prompts me and I say yes. anybody else who's connected and using Table View at that moment in that layout is going to get a layout update, and their Table View is going to reset. It's going to go to this new Table View. So if they've been making custom changes to the Table View while I'm editing the Table View and I'm saving my changes to the Table View, I'm propagating those changes. And that's really no different than if I went into a regular layout, let's say in Form View, and I went into layout mode and I changed this field and made it italics. When I save that change, everybody who's looking at this layout within a couple seconds is going to see italics appear. The same is true for those layout editing privileges when you're in Table View. You have the ability to actually push those out to those remote users. So each of those users sort of has a sandbox, but that sandbox can be kind of, kicked over by a user with the right privileges. So in this sense, there's some strategies you might employ. You might be very selective as to who you give layout editing privileges to, and as a full access user, be very careful that you don't inadvertently change the default view for your layout or change the default table view. You also might choose to create special layouts for table view. So, for example, you might have, when I click on the table view icon, the layout might have a script trigger that says, go to a different layout that's just like this layout, but it's the sandbox layout. Nobody's allowed to edit it. Everyone has their own little sandbox for this particular login to FileMaker. They can modify the table view. When they log out and log back into the database, they'll inherit that default setup again. So what I'm getting at here is the table view really doesn't persist all of those changes and modifications you make. They really only persist for layout editors, and only if they're saved. And then they propagate out to everybody, or they're what everybody inherits when they first log in. Unlike other users who kind of get, like with the quick charts, kind of sandboxed into their own edits for that own session, for that own round of using the database, and then when they log out, all those changes and settings that they made were really just temporary. And that's why we come back full circle to this concept of it's really for ad hoc reporting. So trusting and hoping that we still have a recording going on, and I see that we still have a number of attendees, so I'm guessing you are hearing me because you otherwise would have left. There's a lot more I could show, and I would love to show perhaps some future event about Table View and some of those particular dialog boxes. And it's really neat if you can show side by side, as I did earlier today with one of my developers, just kind of verifying some of these behaviors. But it's really fascinating when you are logged in with two users, seeing that interplay. So on that note, where can you find out more about these features and others of FileMaker 12? Well, first of all, I definitely direct you to FileMakerAcademy.com. There's a number of other seminars every week for the next few weeks as we roll out more seminars with other members from other platinum-level FileMaker companies who are charter members about the different features, and I recommend you attend all of them. There's some really great trainers and presenters in the mix. Of course, the FileMaker training series, I know that this is in the works of coming out with a new version for 12. I don't have specific dates I can offer you at this juncture, but we recently ourselves as trainers been through some of the preliminary training for the new materials, and we look forward to talking to you guys about that when more information is available. But of course, with 12 coming out, we're all expecting new information about new training series and new certifications. So keep your ears peeled to FileMaker and their training site. In addition, the developer community, I'm sure, is a place where those of you who are either TechNet subscribers or developer subscriptions or just have the free developer community subscription, you can continue to find out about future FileMaker Academy events there, as well as information about the training series and DevCon. And so I recommend if you don't have a free account to the developer community that you get one. Certainly welcome to follow any of these links. The presentation and or the video for this will be presented on the FileMaker Academy website as well as on our blog. And we'll be tweeting and announcing that as that's available, as well as anything we can about the future events for FileMaker Academy. With that, I'd say next week's class is on container field enhancements. This is a major change. I really recommend you attend. I believe that's being done by Tim Neudecker of QLogic. If I've misquoted that, I apologize to the actual presenter. That's on Thursday, April 26th, later this week. But check out FileMakerAcademy.com for updates or to register. Otherwise, this is a list of the current FileMaker Academy charter members. I welcome you to either contact them directly if you'd like any assistance and you're near them and it shows you where they're located. They will all be happy to talk to you about this content or other aspects of FileMaker 12. That's all I've got. Thanks for attending. And I'm sorry we don't have more time for more questions, but I want to wrap up on time. I appreciate it.